Good morning, friends. It's time for the Striker Texas MLS podcast. We had a Copa Tejas match that was a thrilling game, a 2-2 draw. I was down at Q2 Stadium visiting Chris Bills in Austin. Victor Araiza has coverage as well of a Houston Dynamo victory over the Chicago Fire that turned out to be more exciting, Victor, than I said it would be on the Twitter Spaces. We'll get to that game in a bit, but first let's start with the rivalry. Chris, we talked about this after the game. It doesn't feel like we were actually talking that long ago, and I guess we
I
weren't.
know.
But
And
we kind
I,
of said that this was the first chapter of this rivalry that sort of felt like a big game, an important game, and that we saw great soccer being played, because we've seen other chapters of this, the 5-3 obviously, that were fun, that had goals, but the quality last year maybe wasn't there. This year it felt like, man, this thing has some legs.
I couldn't get enough of your company, John. I just decided to follow you right back to 535. I was in Frisco last night watching the Austin FC under-15s beat the number one team in the country, LAFC. So more of that coming on the striker. But we'll get back into Copa Tejas, and it was a thrilling match. I think the thing that I got on the rewatch and also writing my notebook that you can see with quotes from Josh Wolff and Denny Hosen and Felipe and some of the other guys. It was my big takeaway from the match was that I think FC Dallas to me felt like they're for real. Maybe could use a center back, right? but other than that, I felt like FC Dallas looks like a finished product, and Austin FC looks like a team of, well, I said SOBs on Twitter, but a team that has a lot of resiliency. They just find ways to get it done, and it's a team that I don't think anybody's going to want to face in the playoffs. But if they really want to be an MLS Cup contender, I think they need a couple more pieces. I don't know. Do you think that's fair, John, or am I off base a little bit?
I would say that FC Dallas feels like they need to mentally get more locked into games. If you're watching the video edition, we're rolling the highlights here of this Copa Tejas matchup. And, I think that FC Dallas talked about trying to finish games more in the first half. As you're seeing from some of these highlights, they were happy enough to not have the ball and then sort of spring forward in some of these attacks. Paxton Pomykal gets to the byline and cuts it back in the 21st minute, and you saw FCD, have several scoring chances. But then I think Austin closed the second half better. The game kind of turns in the second half when FC Dallas finally gets a press that pays off. John Gallagher with a bit of a bobble in possession there. Paul Arriola takes the ball, convinces him to put a bad pass in, then follows the play and scores that first goal. But I don't know that FC Dallas did enough to adjust to having the lead, which is a weird thing to say, because as we're about to see, they then go up 2-0. They are able to sort of tighten the screws a little bit to get the goal here as another player who starts and finishes the move, Brandon Cervenia. A pass here ends up back to him in the box. He finishes past Brad Stuver. But then Austin, you're mentioning that resiliency, Chris. They really turned it on.
They did, and I think it's been really impressive to see the way that they've reacted to big moments in matches, especially these last two. Having the red card to Denny Pereira just before halftime in Montreal, they are able to win with 10 men, and then in this one, 2-0 felt like they, and certainly last year they would have packed it in, and that would have been all she wrote. But in this one, they just kind of stuck to their guns. They stuck with the game plan, and they plugged in Moussa Djitté, who you can see here just completely manhandling Jose Martinez, and Sebastian Drusi with a nice finish. But I think it was just really impressive from the subs, from everybody, and just the mentality of this group. Josh Wolff mentioned it, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to share this story in more depth on the Striker Texas in the coming weeks. But Josh Wolff mentioned that there's a team psychologist that they've been working with that's had a big impact on this group. I talked to Denny Hosen a little bit about that, and and he kind of mentioned, he brought up without me even sort of bringing up his sort of struggles to get back his mentality of being able to contribute after the difficulty of his injury last year, just how down the fan base was on him, and just sort of flipping his mindset. And he comes into this one and he gets the equalizer, and a really big moment for both him and Moussa Djitté, the two strikers who have played a combined like 250 minutes this year. And I think there's potential. And I'm not sure we'll see a lot of it, but I think there's potential for sort of a Bash Brothers energy with those two coming in off the bench and moments like this.
Chris, you said that maybe Austin FC is a couple pieces away from being a real
Hmm.
MLS Cup contender. Maybe FC Dallas is more of a finished product. But I would say if guys who are substitutes, and we see, two of them linking up for this winning
Hmm.
goal, Nick Lima to Danny Hosen, if guys like Danny Hosen, if guys like Nick Lima, if guys like Musa Jite are right, if they are able to contribute like they were in this game, maybe that roster build that you say, it's good, they should make the playoffs this year, but maybe not great, becomes a great team if those guys are able to contribute at the level they were contribute on Saturday. I just think that we haven't seen them do that
Yeah.
consistently. So there's a fair amount of skepticism on fans' part, on you and the press's part. But there are
Well,
some pieces there who, if they take a step forward or do what they've done in the past in some cases, this could still be a team that's competing for
yeah.
silverware, which look like to say that in late June after the season that they had as their first season in the league is remarkable.
It is remarkable, and I don't like those words. I don't mean that as a knock on anybody. I actually think it's more. I mean that more of a positive sense of like this team is getting more from itself than the sum of it, or it's the sum of its parts is greater than the parts themselves. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's a testament to Josh Wolff. It's a testament to everybody on the roster that they've all bought in. I just think that like they could be even better. And I think that's like the mentality that I think that this club has is like you keep striving, you keep building, you keep going. And they've got an opportunity this summer. I guess that's all I'm saying is that the July window is about to open. Can they add a couple guys that also have that mentality and have that special sauce
Yeah. I mean, look,
without losing it? I think
the rich are getting
that's
richer.
right.
The rich are getting richer because LAFC, who FC Dallas goes to face now in LA midweek, they're sitting at the top of the conference. They look pretty darn good. And they're about to add a guy who's going to the World Cup with Wales, who just played with Real Madrid and Tottenham Hotspur, whose name is Gareth Bale. This is a move that, yeah, I think you're kind of saying, Chris, like if they signed a Bale, Austin would suddenly be in MLS Cup contention. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like it's a move that LAFC is making and Austin isn't.
But it's steps, right? And I think that they're on a good path
Absolutely.
for this year. Even if they stay where they're at and they make the playoffs and they're a really tough out, which I think they would be, then I think that you call this year a success. I just think that there's an opportunity here. That's all I'm trying to say.
I'm not saying that they should go out and sign Gareth Bale, but to me, Victor, that was a move, and it sounds like Carlos
Yeah,
Vela is
it
also
was.
going to resign. I mean,
You
that
know
is
what?
the
That's
kind of
probably
move
what
that we've
convinced
talked
them.
about. I mean, look, whenever I saw Tom Bogo, who's we've had on the Striker Summit before, a friend of ours, a fantastic reporter. Whenever I saw his report, I said, well, "This has to be true. It's coming from Tom." And I said, "Man, I wonder if this kind of contradicts or is because of a previous Tom report a couple months ago. He said, "Oh, the Vela thing is done," and then it hasn't been announced. And Vela was saying, "It's not done. It's not done. It's not done." It still hasn't been announced to my knowledge. Maybe LAFC is doing something here this morning, but it sounds like it's going to be Vela working with Bale. And I mean, Victor, look, you talk about like, can the Dynamo add a piece here? Can the Dynamo add a piece here? They've added Hector Herrera, another player who's actually had a better La Liga
Yeah,
recent history than Bale. But I mean, these are still the caliber of moves that the top teams in MLS, who I think we'd say, look, while we're impressed with what the Texas teams have done, the top tier of like real MLS Cup contenders right now, June 27th, are the types of teams who are going out and buying Gareth Bale, who are fending off offers for Tati Castellanos. I think he probably goes, but he's been here for longer than I thought he would at New York City FC. Like these are the tiers of teams. It doesn't mean a team can't jump up from that second or third tier and do well. Doesn't mean we can't say, "Wow, great job tactically, Josh Wolff, Nico Estévez, for putting your team in this rung." But when you see that Bale move, Victor, it's like, oh, there's some guys who
yeah.
are playing with
No,
their game.
it's the conversation, right? Too about a big attacking piece. We've seen it over the
Hometown.
years. It's the reason why over in the West, it's been Seattle and Portland, right? And LAFC. You can say they've been Supporters Shield winners and all that, but at the end of the day, they've never broken through the Western Conference in the playoffs, right? It's still been Seattle and still been Portland. Seattle for a big reason because of guys like Rui Diaz and Lodeiro, which maybe people won't put up there with a guy like Bale, but big players in MLS. The reason why Toronto in the East was dominating for a couple of years was because of Jovinko and having that trident with Altidore and Bradley. Now they got Insigne, right? That's another big name coming to MLS. and I think the Eastern's a little bit wide open, but that's the one maybe big spender. That's a question I wanted to twist over to you guys, because Herrera's arriving in Houston this week. They're presenting him. There is a conflict with the Dash game, so there's a little bit of controversy around that. But
yeah, that's lame.
But he's coming into town and he's going to debut supposedly next week, right? Unless something changes against FC Dallas in the Texas Derby. But I want to ask you guys. I mean, does your markets need a guy like that? Dallas certainly is capable of that, with the money in town, with the size of the city. In Austin, I mean, Austin, they came in talking strong, right? When they joined the league, there was even Chicharito out there at one point, and I don't think anybody
told our own Chris Bills that he wanted to sign Chicharito before the striker was even a thought in his mind. I remember. I think for Dallas,
that's right.
On the one hand, you can say, why wouldn't you sign a guy like Bale? But I would say there's two things. First of all, Bale doesn't want to come to Dallas. He wants to live in LA.
No, but just a big name period. Like even a guy like in the realm of Hector Herrera, some game changer of that quality.
I think you could argue, Victor, that it's we're seeing the team sell out this year. I want to continue to talk a little bit about the game Saturday. It was a great crowd, traveling support for the first time since I talked to El Matador president Luis Dollar before the game at the supporters meetup. He said it's the first time that he can remember, and he's been around a long time. I've been around longer, and I'll say it's the first time I can really recall in the recent history that the allocation that the opposing club gave FC Dallas supporters was sold out. And you could see there were noticeably more fans than just the supporters. It's not a knock on Austin. Obviously, the Austin supporters are amazing. Obviously, the fan base has been great from minute one. Obviously, there are more Austin fans than FC Dallas fans.
And it's not a cheap ticket in Austin either.
Yes, that means some FC Dallas fans shelled out some money, some real money to go.
For sure. I think it was $70 for the supporters, for the officials. So, I mean, that's already, in this economy. But I will say, I think that you see some of that momentum now coming from marketing, and it's easy for FC Dallas to market MLS tied atop the goal scoring charts, Jesus Ferreira, a guy from your neighborhood, a guy from this academy, a guy who we produced. And then they say, hey, we made this move for Paul Arriola, which is a record-breaking move within MLS.
And to their point, it's two national team players.
It's two national team players. It's two guys who score goals. It's two guys who are willing to talk to the cameras, who are on billboards. So I think yes, you could say, why don't you sign a bigger name? But at the same time, if you are going to get success out of these players that you can also market, which with the top leading goal scorer and the second place goal scorer in the league with ties and everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
how much fun was it? How much fun was it, John, to watch Alan Velasco against Sebastian Drusi? I mean, these two guys are young and, they're top dollar players. I think we both think they're really quality, among the best players in the league. And yeah, maybe it's not Gareth Bale, maybe like your average fan walking in off the street from a bachelor party doesn't know who this guy is. But as soon as you walk in the building, pretty quickly that number 20 on FC Dallas and number 7 on Austin FC are making plays that nobody else can.
And I think maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, and feel free to call me on it if I am. But I think while to me Bale is a great signing because they got him on TAM. He's not a designated player, and he's not the reason to come to the stadium. Fans are already going to see LAFC. Fans, is there pressure on Bale? Right. No. And I think that's what's going to allow him to succeed because the pressure's already on Carlos Vela. The pressure's already on
the team.
Even at the back, right? They bring Chiellini. He's going to be a leader. He's going to be a rock. But a teenager from Senegal has been soaking up this pressure and dealing with whatever MLS attackers get thrown at him for the past several months. So it's I just think it's a really good situation. So I think on field, FC Dallas has been a good product this year. They've started to share that with the community and say, hey, come check out what we're doing. We're doing something different. We're going to try. Nico Estévez is a genius. They've marketed this in a way where it's I do understand why for the first time in decades plus, there are hundreds of traveling fans going to Austin to see that game at Q2. So I think you can say, I don't have a problem with FC Dallas not playing in the sandbox of bringing Gareth Bale and Chiellini. I just think you are competing. You are playing in the same sandbox on field with them on Wednesday when FC Dallas goes to play LAFC. If you can get your model, if you can get your tactics, if you can get your soccer and have these players compete with those level of players and win, I don't care. I don't care if you have Gareth Bale and Carlos Vela if my team beats your team on the field and I'm lifting the trophy at the end of the
Right,
season,
but to come
I
back
can get fans in the seats, right?
to come back over to the weekend, I mean, you said, I mean, this is a team that Austin should have probably won this game, right? They have the home field advantage. They probably shouldn't have been on their heels as much against FC Dallas. If an LAFC or Seattle or another team like that, I mean, that's still something they have to prove at Q2. Does a player like that make them from, you know, and I think Bill's put it out there where it's, you know, they seem like a top 5 seed nobody wants to play, but they're not that team yet that you can consider an MLS Cup contender.
I would say two things. I would say, one, they have a designated player who they're not using.
Yep.
And I don't think they should use because of what the fans have said about Cecilio Dominguez. That's kind of tying one hand behind your back, or maybe you say Cecilio, top hand.
That's a spot
wherever you want to place
you
them.
can open up.
That's a place where maybe Austin needs to do something, because I do think
But I also think, guys, and I don't know, like I've been sort of tempering how I want to kind of put this into the universe. So I guess here we go. But like, I don't think you just like get rid of him and then panic by the first DP that falls into your lap, right?
I agree.
I think,
but you would think they would be. They already have a list. They've already been ahead of this.
I would hope so, but even if like it's hard to get these deals done in the summer or whatever, you know, like especially leading into a World Cup, I'm not gonna be super surprised if we get through this window, Cecilia gets sold, and they don't have another DP. I will be surprised if they don't make another signing. But
what I hear
I
you
wouldn't
saying,
be surprised.
Chris.
Yeah.
See if I can underline with even what you said at the start. What I hear you saying is this Austin FC team is very good. If fans are a little patient, they could go from a good or great team in the West to a phenomenal team, to a team that is competing with a trophy within a couple year period, if they can keep this momentum.
With this core, with this core of players, I think. Yeah.
There's a window.
And I think that's totally fair. And I think, you know, if Josh Wolff and Claudio Reyna are here, they probably say, like, look, we don't think we're going to be an MLS Cup winner in year 2. You know, Atlanta United maybe set the blueprint for some expansion teams to do that. But, you know, Minnesota, I mean, they've never been contending for the top title. So real quick, before we get to Houston Dynamo's match this weekend, Chris, before the match, I talked to Nico Estévez and got quotes as well from Josh Wolff about their relationship. They're close friends. Obviously, we're on Greg Berhalter's staff. They were able to get together for. Now, Nico described it as a brunch. Josh Wolff described it as a lunch. Maybe it was down to the order. Maybe Estévez ordered eggs and Josh Wolff got a sandwich or something. I don't know. But they all were together. They linked up with Greg Berhalter when the U.S. national team was in Austin.
We should have had them on the segment this week for what's the best thing they ate.
Maybe we'll try and make a late call. But Chris, I feel that this was a great battle tactically, because for about 75 minutes, I think Nico got the best of Josh. He knew what to expect. FC Dallas looked more comfortable doing something that maybe they didn't want to do. You know, they said, we don't necessarily need the ball. We'll attack quickly when we get it, when we win that ball back. But we're okay. You guys play. You guys do your passing. You guys do what FC Dallas often wants to do. And we're gonna cause some problems for you. And then you saw the balance sort of shift when Josh made the subs. A note that's in the piece on the striker Texas, Nico Estévez was mad. Now, he doesn't get like Bob Knight angry and throw things, but Nico Estévez in Spanish to me and then in English to the FC Dallas TV crew that was there, without provocation, he was like, couldn't get my subs in. After Denny Houston goes into the game, he immediately wanted to counter with a third center back with Nkosi Tafari, and he couldn't get him in. The goal falls, and then he makes the 3 subs. He was pretty heated. But how do you sort of handicap, or I guess, you know, evaluate or judge the battle between these two coaches, which is a subplot I think we'll see in Copa Tejas matches in the future?
Yeah, that's interesting, because that actually happened to Austin FC earlier this year. I'm trying to remember which game it was, but it might have been that LA Galaxy match that was going to slip away probably anyway. But there was a moment when Josh Wolff wanted to get his subs in that didn't. So anyway, what goes around comes around, I guess, to a certain extent over a 34-game season. Anyway, we were talking in the press box, and I thought it was really interesting to watch these two go against each other for the first time, and just the pragmatism and the that Nico Estévez showed, giving Austin the ball, letting them be on the front foot, but basically stretching them out. And so when the ball turned over, you had Paul Arriola running at John Gallagher. You did a lot of matchups that Nico Estévez obviously really liked coming into this one, and they made Austin pay for it. But at the same time, I think Austin, they stick with their guns, right? They stick with the game plan. They stick with being on the front foot. They stick with having possession and creating. And sometimes it takes time to break opponents down. And in this one, it paid off. And so I think that you had both of these coaches, and I think you could maybe say that Nico Estévez, maybe more than Josh Wolff, won this tactical battle because it took the subs and it took, sort of the heart and, that resiliency that we've seen from Austin FC. But I do think it was a really good clash of styles and something that I'm really excited to watch over the next few seasons, how these two battle each other, because I think that they're both really good coaches.
I think it will be something fascinating to watch for the next few seasons. Ramiro Rios, I said Austin's not winning it all this year. He said, nah,
he said
we're taking an MLS Cup this season. If that's the expectation from fans, it's going to be tough for Austin FC to meet it, but it is possible. They did look good on Saturday, especially with that resiliency that Chris Bills mentioned and wrote about on the Striker Texas in a piece you can check out. We got, coverage of the game, highlights, a match recap from me, but then the deeper analytical pieces on both sides, whether you're a fan of Austin, a fan of FC Dallas, or just a curious neutral, you can check out, dig a little bit deeper on the Striker Texas. We hope you'll look at those pieces, hear what they said in the locker room after the game. We're getting great access now, honestly, from the league, from the teams, and I wouldn't want that to go to waste. So I hope people are digging in and enjoying. Chris mentioned who we heard from Austin. I talked to Paul Arriola. I talked to Brandon Cervenia. I talked to Nico Estévez for a while. We really are trying to paint the whole picture for you on the Striker Texas. Let's paint the picture a little bit of where the Houston Dynamo are at.
Yeah, before we take off from this game, I do want to say props.
Step on my transition.
Hold on. No, I do want to say before we end with this game, and I don't think we had a video of it on the highlights, but I do want to point out props to the Austin fans. We know they bring it when they do some tifos, but the tribute to the Uvalde victims. I just round of applause. These kind of things, the display to, I don't know, it just it's heartwarming and it's great to see, and hopefully we can all come into this community and see more change.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a weekend where supporters all over the country made their voice heard, whether it was continuing to talk about gun violence with the tribute that Austin did. The fans, the Murga played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I believe, as a tribute to those victims, the names of each of them. I mean, it's hard to see that. And, also with the Roe versus Wade decision, lots of supporters and even some teams coming out and saying, well, we don't agree with this. This isn't right. And making their voice heard there. I think we'll be seeing more from supporters. It was tough Friday. I know that some groups are scrambling to try and get banners and stuff and put out messages on social media. But we want to keep amplifying those voices. And certainly, I like to see that and want to see more of it. Let's talk about Houston now, Victor. 2-0 from the Dynamo. This is kind of what they
linking him with a move to Mexico, which would certainly be interesting.
You thought was
Rodriguez at the baseline, serving it in. There's an opportunity, and that will find.
Bit of a broken play. Chicago will find themselves a bit unlucky to find themselves down, but just ahead of the byline, a decent cross. And Sekulic
in the first couple of 10 minutes.
There's Zeka again. He'll whip it into the box.
They don't make use of, but you see Doro Parson, right? Taking advantage of maybe
getting back up to their feet. Quintero, and that should hold.
To the wing, gets that goal.
Houston working on a second one right now. Quintero back of the net. Then you look at from a goalkeeping standpoint, 6 clean sheets, but yet only 3 wins.
Quintero threw him behind towards Ferreira. Flag and stay down. It's 3-0. Houston Dynamo. Ferreira gets the goal. He probably should have scored in the first half.
I think it's got one of those screens on there like they have at the bank.
But managing the
transparency cover. So let's see. After a consultation with VAR,
averaging just under 60 minutes per game.
Offside. It's no goal.
When it's at home, he starts.
Sekulic. Overhead kick attempted there by Herbers.
Prior, he's an option off
Couldn't
the
quite
bench.
make contact, and now here's
Duran.
Duran.
Puzzle still to solve, right, with the coach.
Depending on the angle of this ball, as Jimenez will go for the cross in. Leaping header across that 6-yard box, and an overhead kick to get it clear. Rising header there from Duran as well. Might just have been offside if they checked that, but it was Lundqvist on the back post who made sure by hooking that one away.
Help a guy like that.
It was a great service, and
maybe don't give as many balls away. Steve Clark, by the way.
Clark can even take it. There is the full-time whistle. A professional performance for 90 minutes for Paulo Nagamura's Houston Dynamo. Thoro Farson and Godwin Quintero the goals. It finishes Houston Dynamo 2, Chicago
team in the East. I know they say it's a good team, but Houston said we're trying to compliment them and say it was a good team, but this was a team for the pickings. They did what they had to do. Could have been a trap game, but got out of it nicely. And now you look forward to a week where you have 2 games. It's not going to be the easiest thing because even though you're in front of Portland, a Portland win means they jump you in the standings, which is the most probable outcome. Again, I think Quintero probably goes back to the bench. This may be a game you drop on the road because they haven't had best of luck in Portland, and then you come back home against Charlotte. You try to win that game, and then that's when you get Herrera in and try to see if you can start pushing up the Western Conference, which has been the biggest thing, right? They keep trying to break through. I think the early start at the top or near the top was because of that home stretch at the beginning, and now they need to make up for that here in summer.
And John was adamant that this was going to be 0-0, just the most boring game on the schedule.
I didn't say it was going to be 0-0. I said it was going to be boring.
No,
I said it was going to be boring, and it was.
But I mean, credit where credit's due. Houston takes advantage of a bad team and at home, and is this a sign, Victor, that this team, as we get to this point in the season where, I mean, is this the point in the season last year where Houston went like 2 months?
Yeah, this is when they went without a win.
Without a win.
Dynamo.
So this maybe is a different Houston Dynamo team we're witnessing poke through the clouds this summer.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's still wait and see. But the expectation is a guy like Herrera is just going to bring the level up, right? And that's something that hasn't been here in a while.
I'm so excited. Not necessarily. I actually do like Ache. I think he's a fun player. I mean, look, but I'm just excited for him to actually get here. We've been talking about it for so long. And it is a big move, and it kind of conditions everything you say about the Dynamo all season. You've been saying, XYZ, but what happens when Ache gets here? XYZ, then maybe that changes when he comes in. Even talking about Quintero has been the best player. No one's really stepped up to take that role. But even though Herrera is more of a two-way midfielder, I think maybe is going to be filling a somewhat defensive role in MLS. He passes really well. He starts attacks really well. I think the dynamic absolutely will change when he gets here. Let's quickly talk about the games that these teams have coming up this week. Victor, you mentioned a double match week for Houston, for everyone. I'm going to be seeing a lot of Charlotte in the Texas teams because Austin FC heads to Charlotte for a Thursday game. And then they got a quick turnaround, actually. They play in Houston on Sunday on July 3rd. FC Dallas heads to face LAFC, top team in the conference, as we mentioned, on Wednesday. And then they've got their traditional July 4th home game. That one's against Inter Miami. And Austin, as I mentioned, they're traveling to face Charlotte on Thursday. And then they and Chris Bills fly directly to the Denver area to face the Colorado Rapids. Who has the toughest two-game swing?
I actually think the team's coming back between those games. But
not you.
Scoop there, but not me. No, I'll be up in the mountains. What were you saying?
Who has the hardest two-game swing here? Dallas has a really tough team in the West and then a meh team in the East. Austin has two, kind of mid-range teams. Charlotte dealing with a COVID outbreak. And then Houston, they go to Portland. I didn't mention that one. They go to Portland, and then they face Charlotte. Who has the toughest stretch?
I think it's probably Houston, but let me reframe that a little bit because I do think that this is maybe the biggest stretch of the season for Austin FC. They've got 3 back-to-back away. And you look at where they're at the standings right now, which is, I believe, 3rd in the West, right? Behind LAFC and RSL. If they get through this with, let's say they get through these 3 with 6 points, I think at that point you're starting to say, whoa, this is a legitimate playoff team that could fight for a top 2, top 3 in the West. If they kind of have a difficult 3-game stretch, they're still going to be in the mix for the playoffs, but all of a sudden then it becomes a different conversation. I think this is like sort of the bellwether for what this Austin FC team is. That's kind of how I see this 3-game stretch. So, maybe not the toughest stretch of the 3 teams, but I think it's the biggest one.
Yeah, I think Houston because of their place in the standings, right? And like I said, at some point, even when they were a little higher up, you got to be looking over your shoulder and think Seattle and Portland are going to make a move up a little. Seattle's already passed them in the standings. Now it's Portland's chance, and if they win, they will. And then that turns that Charlotte game into a little bit of a trap game at home. If you stumble into that one, you're stumbling into the Herrera rival, maybe somewhere down, again, 8th, 9th, 10th in the conference.
Dallas' situation is a bit strange because I don't think anyone is going to be upset if you go to LAFC and come back with nothing. They're a great team. We know how good they are. It's a midweek game. It's a tough place to play. But then I think that does put pressure on that Monday, 4th of July game against Inter Miami, a team that is they're not terrible, but they're not great. But FC Dallas also weirdly in the last 2 home games has come out pretty flat. They kind of haven't answered the bell at home, which hasn't been habitual for this team even this season. So I think if they aren't able to get something out of the LAFC game, which I'm not sure that supporters are expecting, I think the team wants to go for, at least a point. Then I think that does shift some of the pressure. But I think the hardest swing, it might be Austin going with those 2 games on the road. We know how tough it is to win away in this league. We know that Charlotte's going to be hungry. It's a weird environment, I think. I know the fans have been good, but playing in an NFL stadium is always a bit of a different wrinkle, I think, for guys. And then they go back on the road again. I think they might have the hardest swing, but there could be pressure on all 3 of our Texas teams. We'll have it covered over on the Striker Texas. I will be gone next week. You guys podding next week on the 4th of July, maybe 5th of July. Figure it out. Stay tuned to the Striker Texas social media to figure out when the Striker Texas podcast drops. I have a hunch it might be like the 5th or something, but I'll let you guys figure it out. I'll be gone for a couple weeks. Much love to the Striker Texas MLS podcast family listeners.
Maybe Bills can pull some strings, get us Willie Nelson after that concert on the podcast.
Well, right. You're the one who's going to be there, right? Are you going?
I'm going to try to make it up. I still need to get my tickets, but I'm going to try to be there. I like some Willie.
It's they always say it's the picnic. Do you take a blanket and some food, or do you have to buy the Q2 stadium?
I think there's other supplies that are probably more common to bring to that one.
You still gotta eat, man. I mean, famously, you have to eat. So I don't know. Hopefully, you can sneak in some hot dogs, some potato salad, and enjoy 4th of July. You, the Striker listener, hope you enjoyed this week. Hope your teams do great. Hope you have a lot of fun watching the games, and hope you follow it all on the Striker Texas. We will talk to you again soon in July. Take care.